The first thing Sienna Lockwood did as a married woman was smash her champagne flute against the penthouse's cold marble wall. The crystal exploded in a shower of golden droplets and shards, a pathetic rebellion against the silence that had swallowed her whole. Hours earlier, she'd said "I do" to Julian Thorne, a man whose fortune could move markets and whose smile could freeze hell over. The wedding had been a spectacle, a cathedral rented for the day, orchids flown in from Thailand, a dress that cost more than her mother's house. But the moment the last guest left, the facade dropped. Julian hadn't even looked at her. He'd simply stepped into a waiting car, instructing the driver to take them to the Thorncrest Tower. He hadn't spoken a word for the entire 30-minute ride. Now, standing in the center of his obsidian and glass universe, the weight of her choice crushed her lungs. She was Mrs. Thorne. And she had never felt more invisible in her life. The silence was a living thing, thick and suffocating. She stumbled to the floor-to-ceiling window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass, watching the city lights twinkle like indifferent stars. Her reflection showed a ghost in a ruinously expensive white gown. "What have I done?" she whispered to the ghost. Before she could answer herself, the sleek titanium door to the suite hissed open. Julian stood there, already changed. The tuxedo was gone, replaced by a charcoal linen shirt, sleeves rolled precisely to his forearms. He looked like he'd come from a board meeting, not his own wedding. His ice-blue eyes scanned the room, pausing on the glittering wreckage of the flute near her feet. No anger. No surprise. Just assessment. "I trust the accommodations are adequate," he said, his voice a smooth, low baritone that held no warmth. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to her all day. Sienna turned, the silk of her gown whispering against the floor. A bitter laugh escaped her. "Accommodations? Is that what we're calling it? My new gilded cage." He walked past her, his cologne, sandalwood and something metallic, briefly filling the air. He went to a hidden panel that slid away to reveal a bar. He poured a measure of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler, not offering her one. "This was the agreement, Sienna. Your father's company is saved from hostile takeover. My public image gains the stability of a wife. We both get what we need." He took a sip, finally looking at her. Emotional theatrics weren't part of the contract. The word contract was a slap. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly freezing. "You didn't even say goodbye to my parents. You didn't look at me once during the entire ceremony. Do you have any idea how that felt?" Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I was fulfilling a requirement. Sentiment is a liability. I thought you understood that when you signed the papers." He set the glass down with a definitive click. "You have the East Wing. It's fully self-contained. My rooms are in the West. The staff will respect your privacy, as will I. We will appear together at necessary public functions. The rest of the time, you are free to live your life. Spend what you like. Go where you wish. Just don't expect companionship." Sienna felt the tears then, hot and humiliating, but she willed them back. She would not cry in front of this statue of a man. "So that's it? We're strangers who share a last name." "It's cleaner that way," he said, his gaze drifting back to the cityscape. "Less complicated." "And our wedding night?" The question hung in the air, charged and dangerous. Julian went very still. He turned his head, and for a fleeting second, she saw something raw flash in his eyes, not desire, but something like panic. It was gone in an instant, buried under a glacier of control. "There will be no wedding night," he stated, each word a chip of ice. "Not tonight. Not ever. This marriage is a business merger. Nothing more." The finality of it shattered the last of her composure. A single, traitorous tear traced a path down her cheek. She hated it, hated him for seeing it. "Why?" she breathed, the word barely audible. "Why go through with a wedding at all if you plan to utterly despise the person beside you?" His expression darkened. "Despise you? I don't know you enough to despise you, Sienna. This isn't personal. It's strategic." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. He didn't look back. "Good night, Mrs. Thorne." The door hissed shut, sealing her in. The sound was the loneliest she'd ever heard. Sienna sank to the floor, the massive, empty room pressing in on her. She cried then, not for the loss of a husband she never had, but for the death of the foolish, desperate hope she'd carried with her to the altar. The hope that maybe, just maybe, behind the cold exterior was a man who could be reached. Julian Thorne had just extinguished that hope with the chilling efficiency of a man snuffing out a candle. He'd left her alone, on the floor of a prison made of glass and steel, on what was supposed to be the most intimate night of her life. Before we dive deeper into Sienna's lonely world, if you're feeling her pain already, you need to see this through. Subscribe and hit the like button right now. It lets us know you're invested, and it helps this story reach others who need to hear it. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We like hearing from you all. Let's see what happens when the sun rises on this impossible marriage. The mornings at Thorncrest were a study in silent opulence. Sienna would wake in her sprawling, pearl-grey suite to find a discreet breakfast tray left by the door. No friendly maid, no invitation to a shared meal. Just the echo of her own footsteps on polished stone. For a week, she was a ghost haunting the periphery of Julian's life. She'd hear the soft whir of his private elevator descending in the pre-dawn darkness. She'd see his black sedan glide away from the tower. He returned long after dark, and sometimes she'd hear the low murmur of his voice from behind the closed door of his study, talking to associates in different time zones. He was a rumor in his own home. The only proof he existed was the lingering scent of his cologne in the hallway and the immutable tension that tightened the air. She tried to fill the void. She ordered books, tried to watch films on the colossal screen, even attempted to bake in the pristine, unused kitchen, a disaster that left a cloud of smoke and a mortified staff member airing the place out. She was drowning in nothingness. On the 8th day, driven by a restless, claustrophobic energy, she ventured further into the tower. She found a door she hadn't noticed before, half hidden by a draped tapestry in a sunroom. It led not to another lavish room, but to a wrought iron staircase winding downwards, warm, humid air wafting up. Curiosity overpowered protocol. She descended. And the breath left her body. It was a greenhouse. But not like any she'd ever seen. It was a vast, cathedral-like space built into the side of the tower, glass walls looking out over a private, walled garden below. It was wild, overgrown, and breathtaking. Lush ferns dripped moisture, exotic flowers with impossible colors bloomed with reckless abandon, and a small, burbling stream cut through the center. It was the complete antithesis of Julian's sterile world above. It was alive. She spent hours there that first day, sitting on a moss-covered stone bench, just breathing in the scent of earth and jasmine. It was the first time since the wedding she didn't feel the walls closing in. She didn't hear him enter. One moment she was alone, tracing the velvety petal of a midnight blue orchid. The next, his voice, colder than the glass walls, cut through the tranquility. "This area is private." Sienna jerked her hand back, her heart hammering. Julian stood at the entrance, still in his impeccably tailored coat, a dusting of snow on the shoulders. He looked out of place, a sharp, modern line against the chaotic beauty. "I'm sorry," she said, standing. "I didn't know." The door was open. "It's never open," he replied, his eyes scanning the space as if checking for damage. "The lock must be faulty." He didn't ask her to leave. He just stood there, a conflicted expression on his face. "It's beautiful," Sienna ventured, hugging herself. "It doesn't feel like the rest of this place." "It's not meant to," he said curtly. Then, to her shock, he stepped fully inside, his shoes crunching softly on the gravel path. "My mother built it. She called it her soul's lungs. She said the world above was for surviving. This was for living." It was the most personal thing he'd ever said to her. Sienna dared to look at him, really look. The harsh lines of his face seemed softer in the dappled green light. "She sounds like a wise woman." She was naive, Julian countered, but his tone lacked its usual bite. He reached out, almost absently, to straighten a leaning stake supporting a clematis vine. She believed beauty was stronger than cruelty. It wasn't. The pain in his voice was so sudden, so naked, it stole Sienna's breath. What happened to her? He went rigid, the shutters slamming down over his eyes. The world happened. He turned to leave. Frustration, weeks of it, bubbled up in Sienna's chest. "Wait." He paused. "You bring me here, to this tomb of luxury, and you ignore me. You give me everything money can buy and starve me of the only thing that actually matters, a single moment of genuine human connection. Why?" Why am I here if not even to be acknowledged? Julian turned slowly. You are here because it was necessary. That's not an answer. Is this about your mother? Did her naivety make you like this? He flinched as if struck. You have no right. I have every right. Sienna fired back, stepping toward him. You made me your wife. Your name is mine now, whether you like it or not. And I am living in the shadow of a ghost, yours. At least tell me whose ghost I'm competing with. The silence stretched, taut and dangerous. The only sound was the trickle of water. Julian's gaze traveled over her face, and for a terrifying, thrilling moment, she thought she saw the ice crack. He looked lost. He looked young. Her name was Alara, he said, the name torn from him. I was going to marry her. I gave her everything, my trust, my plans, my heart. He let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. She was a masterpiece. And I was her greatest mark. 1 week before our wedding, I discovered she was a corporate spy. My biggest rival had paid her to get close to me, to learn my weaknesses, to steal the prototype for a project I'd spent 5 years building. The night I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She smiled and said, "Love is the most expensive weapon, Julian. And you just handed me the ammunition." Sienna's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, God. After that, he continued, his voice now terrifyingly flat, I made a decision. I would become exactly what the world already thought I was, impenetrable. I would never again give anyone the power to devastate me. And it worked. He finally met her eyes. So you see, Sienna, my distance isn't disdain. It's armor. And you asking me to take it off is like asking a burn victim to walk back into the fire. This, he gestured between them. This polite, separate existence is the only kindness I am capable of. It is the only way I know how to keep from destroying you, too. He left her then, standing amidst the thriving plants, his confession hanging in the humid air like a storm cloud. He had shown her his wound, only to use it as the reason he could never heal. And the worst part? She understood. The anger bled away, leaving a profound, aching sadness, for him, for the man he'd buried to survive. She wasn't competing with the ghost of a sweet mother. She was competing with the ghost of a devastating betrayal that had convinced him love was a fatal weakness. As he disappeared up the stairs, his final words from the wedding night echoed with new, terrible meaning. True cruelty would have been letting you believe this could ever be something more. Now she knew. He believed offering hope was the real sin. The game had changed. She was no longer just a prisoner. She was a prisoner who had seen the warden's scars. Can you believe the depth of Julian's pain? It changes everything, doesn't it? Don't stop now. We're just getting to the turning point. Show your support, drop a comment below telling us what you think Sienna should do, and don't forget to like this video. Your interaction fuels these stories. Let's keep going. The greenhouse became an unspoken sanctuary for them both, though never at the same time. Sienna would find evidence of Julian's visits, a pruned branch here, a freshly watered orchid there, a forgotten pair of leather gardening gloves on a bench. He was tending to this one living piece of his past, even as he refused to tend to his present. She, in turn, began to actively care for it. She brought down new plants, identified species in his mother's old, dusty botany books she found in the library, and slowly, the space became even more vibrant. It was their only communication, this silent dialogue through blossoms and soil. The tension in the main house shifted from hostile to electrically charged. They began sharing dinner. Not out of affection, but out of a grim, mutual acknowledgement of the fast they had to maintain. The conversations were stilted, orbiting safe topics like art acquisitions or the weather. But their eyes would catch, and in those fleeting moments, Sienna saw the war within him, the pull of her quiet presence against the push of his old, deep-seated fear. The breaking point came during a charity gala at the Tower. It was their first major public appearance as a couple. Julian was the perfect, attentive husband in front of the cameras, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, laughing at the right moments, his gaze on her looking, to the outside world, like admiration. Sienna played her part flawlessly, her smiles radiant, her conversation sparkling. She was the beautiful, enigmatic Mrs. Thorne. Inside, she was screaming. After the last guest was ushered out, the silence of the emptied ballroom was deafening. The mask dropped from Julian's face so completely it was jarring. He looked exhausted, hollow. He walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of water, handing one to her. It was such a simple, domestic gesture it made her chest hurt. "You were exceptional tonight," he said quietly, not looking at her. "Thank you." It was the first genuine compliment he'd ever paid her. "It was an act," Sienna replied, her voice just as quiet. "We're both exceptional actors, Julian." He finally looked at her, his blue eyes searching hers in the dim light. "Is it all an act?" The question hung between them, dangerous and hopeful. Before she could answer, a violent summer storm erupted outside. A peal of thunder shook the very foundations of the tower. And then, the lights went out. Plunged into utter blackness, Sienna gasped. A moment later, a strong, warm hand found hers in the dark. "Julian. It's the backup generators. They'll kick in," he said, his voice close. But he didn't let go of her hand. His grip was firm, real. They stood there, connected in the profound darkness, the only sound their breathing and the drumming rain. Then, Julian's hand suddenly tightened. "The greenhouse," he muttered, a note of pure panic in his voice she'd never heard before. "The lateral storm, the old glass." He dropped her hand and she heard him fumbling, then the beam of his phone flashlight cut through the black. He was already moving, not toward the elevators, but toward the staircase. "Julian," she called, following him, her heart in her throat. He was terrified. For the plants. They stumbled down the wrought iron stairs in the bouncing light. The greenhouse was a scene of chaos. Wind howled through a vent that had burst open. Rain was sheeting in, and a large pane of glass on the windward side had a crack splintering across it like a spider web. Julian was already there, wrestling with a heavy tarpaulin, trying to shield his mother's orchids. He was soaked, his shirt plastered to his skin, his hair wild. He looked utterly human. Sienna didn't hesitate. She grabbed another tarp and fought against the wind to help him. For 10 frantic minutes, they worked in tandem, wordlessly, bathed in lightning flashes, securing the plants, moving the most delicate specimens to safety. When the immediate crisis was contained, they stood panting in the middle of the path, soaked to the bone, water dripping from their faces. The generator lights flickered on below, casting a weak, golden glow over the ravaged, beautiful space. Julian was staring at her, his chest heaving. Not with the effort, but with emotion. The walls were gone. Everything he'd spent years building up was lying in rubble at his feet, washed away by the storm. "Why?" he rasped, his voice raw. "Why would you do this? Why do you keep pushing?" The dam broke. Sienna threw her hands up. "Because I see you, Julian. I see the man who built a secret garden for his mother. The man who panics over orchids. The man who is so much more than a heartless billionaire. And I am tired of you making me feel invisible for it." "You should want me to be invisible," he shouted back, the sound echoing off the glass. "The man you see is a weakness. He's the man who gets destroyed." "So you destroy him first," she yelled, stepping closer, rain and tears mingling on her face. "Every single day, you choose to bury him alive in this tower because you're scared? Well, I'm scared too. I'm scared I'll spend the rest of my life married to a ghost. I'm scared that I'll never be seen, never be loved." The word exploded between them. Julian froze. Then, a violent tremor went through him. He closed the distance between them in one stride, his hands coming up to frame her face. His touch was desperate. "Don't," he begged, his forehead dropping to hers, their breath mingling. "Don't say that word. You have no idea what you're asking for." "I'm asking for you," she whispered, her lips trembling. "Just you. The real you. Not the tycoon. Not the armor. The man who cries for broken glass." A ragged sob tore from his throat. It was the most vulnerable sound she'd ever heard. "Sienna. I looked at you on our wedding day. I saw you walking toward me, and for one terrifying second, I wanted it. I wanted the dream. I wanted you. And it felt like a death sentence. So I ran. I shut the door because it was the only way to survive wanting something that much." He was crying. Julian Thorne was crying. "I hurt you to protect myself. And that makes me the monster you probably think I am." Sienna's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the space of a heartbeat. She brought her hands up, covering his where they held her face. "You're not a monster," she said, her voice steady now. Sure. You're a man who was hurt so badly he forgot how to stop bleeding. Let me help. Let me in. He searched her eyes, looking for the lie, the trap. He found only fierce, unwavering truth. With a groan of surrender, of release, he kissed her. It was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't calculated or controlled. It was messy, wet with rain and tears, hungry, and full of a decade's worth of pent-up longing and fear. It was the kiss of a man finally coming up for air. It was the kiss of a woman finally being seen. When they broke apart, they were both shaking. He rested his forehead against hers again, his eyes closed. I don't know how to do this, he confessed, his voice wrecked. I don't know how to be a husband. Sienna smiled through her tears. We'll learn. Together. The storm outside was finally passing, but the one in their hearts was just beginning to clear. This is where everything changes. Are you feeling the hope right now? Let us know in the comments. And please, give this video a like if you're rooting for them. Every like tells the algorithm to share this story with more people. Now, for the ending you've been waiting for. 6 months later, the Thorncrest Tower still pierced the Manhattan skyline, a monument of steel and ambition. But inside, it hummed with a different energy. The silence had been replaced by the soft strains of jazz that often floated from the library in the evenings. The east and west wings were no longer hostile territories, but connected by a well-worn path across the main living area, often littered with Sienna's gardening books and Julian's discarded suit jackets. The transformation wasn't in the architecture, but in the atmosphere. It was in the full coffee pot left on in the morning, the shared, sleepy smiles over the newspaper. It was in Julian cancelling a meeting in Singapore because Sienna had a fear of storms and one was forecast. It was in Sienna learning the brutal intricacies of his business, not to spy, but to understand the weight he carried, so she could lift some of it from his shoulders when he came home. He was learning, day by painful, beautiful day. He learned to apologize. He learned to listen, truly listen, not just wait for his turn to speak. He learned that touch could be a comfort, not a weapon, a hand on her back as she passed, his fingers lacing with hers on the elevator ride down, his head resting in her lap as she read aloud. He was thawing, and in his thaw, Sienna blossomed. She had taken full command of the greenhouse and the walled garden below. It was no longer a hidden relic, but the vibrant, pulsing heart of the tower. She hosted charity garden teas, the city's elite marveling at the jungle thriving in the sky. Julian would often slip away from his office to watch her from the doorway, a quiet, wondering smile on his face as she explained the pollination habits of a rare orchid to a captivated guest. She was no longer the invisible wife. She was its radiant center. One crisp autumn morning, Sienna was in the greenhouse, repotting a stubborn azalea. She wore faded jeans and one of Julian's old, soft Oxfords, the sleeves rolled past her elbows. Her hands were dirty, her hair was escaping its bun, and she was humming. She felt his presence before she saw him. A warmth at her back, a familiar shift in the air. She didn't turn. You're missing a very boring conference call about maritime insurance liabilities, Julian murmured, his lips brushing the shell of her ear as he wrapped his arms around her waist. A tragedy, she said, leaning back into his solid chest. I'm sure it was riveting. It paled in comparison to the view from my window, he said, his voice low and intimate. He nuzzled her neck. Do you know what today is? Sienna smiled, pressing a dirt-smudged hand over his. Tuesday. He chuckled, the sound a warm vibration against her back. 6 months. 6 months since what? She teased, finally turning in his arms to face him. Since the storm? His eyes, those once frozen lakes, were now the color of a warm summer sky. He looked at her with a softness that still had the power to steal her breath. Since you looked at the monster and decided to see the man instead. Her throat tightened. He was always there, Julian. He was just hiding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Not the kind that held a ring, but something slimmer. Her breath hitched. I'm not good with words. Not the ones that matter, he began, his voice slightly rough. I spent a lifetime building fortresses. You didn't lay siege to mine. You just planted a garden at the gate. And one day, I looked out and realized the walls were covered in flowers, and I didn't need them anymore. He opened the box. Nestled inside wasn't a jewel, but an old, ornate, brass key. It was patinated with age and use. "It's the original key to this greenhouse," he said, lifting it out. The morning sun caught its edges. "My mother gave it to me when I was a boy. She said it was the key to the only room in the world that made sense." He took her dirty hand gently and pressed the key into her palm, closing her fingers around it. His hand enveloped hers. "It belongs to you now. Because you are the only thing that has ever made sense to me." Tears welled in Sienna's eyes, not of sadness, but of a joy so profound it felt like light breaking through her very skin. This was more precious than any diamond. This was a symbol of trust, of history, of home. He was giving her the key to his sanctuary, because she had already been given the key to his heart. "Julian," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I love you, Sienna." The words were clear, strong, and utterly sure. "I was so afraid of them. But saying them to you feels like the truest, easiest thing I've ever done. I love you. Not because of a contract. Not for stability. Just because you are you. And you saw me." She threw her arms around his neck, the key clutched tightly in her fist between them. "I love you," she said against his skin, the words she'd ached to say finally free. "I have loved you since you cried over cracked glass." They stood there, wrapped in sunlight and the scent of earth, for a long time. The billionaire and the gardener. The man who built walls and the woman who taught him what to grow on them. Later that evening, they sat on the stone bench in the greenhouse, a shared blanket over their legs, watching the city lights begin to sparkle like earthbound stars. Sienna's head rested on Julian's shoulder, the old key on a simple chain around her neck. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, into the peaceful silence. "For what?" "For our wedding night." He kissed her hair. "For leaving you alone in the dark." Sienna lifted her head and looked at him, her smile gentle. She cupped his face, her thumb stroking his cheek. "Don't be. That night brought us here." She kissed him, soft and lingering. "We don't have a traditional love story, Julian. We have a better one. We chose each other. We fought for each other. We rebuilt each other. Every scar, every tear, every moment of silence, it all led to this. To us." He pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers, the way he had in the rain the night everything changed. "Then let's rewrite the story," he whispered. "Starting now. With every sunrise." And they did. The Thorncrest Tower still stands, cold and imposing to those who pass by. But if you look closely, on the southern face, you'll see a glittering, glass jewel box overflowing with life. And if you believe in such things, you might just feel the warmth radiating from it, a warmth born not from money or power, but from a love that was planted in barren soil, tended with patience and courage, and grew, against all odds, wild and free and unbreakable. He was never heartless. His heart was just waiting for the right keeper. And she was never just a bride. She was the dawn after his longest night. Thank you for watching Sienna and Julian's journey from despair to undeniable love. If this story moved you, if you felt their pain and celebrated their joy, then do us a huge favor, subscribe to the channel. We tell these tales for you. Comment below and tell us, what was the moment your heart melted for Julian? Or where are you watching from? We like hearing from you all. And finally, please like this video. That like button is the key that helps us unlock more stories just like this one. Until next time, remember, even the most fortified heart can bloom.